Alhamdulillah. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, may peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some thoughts are not loud. They are heavy. They sit quietly in the chest, pressing against the heart, asking questions that never seem to have answers. And sometimes the exhaustion you feel is not from what you did today, but from everything your mind has been carrying alone. Overthinking is not weakness. It is often the sign of a heart that cares deeply, a soul that wants things to make sense, a believer who is afraid of falling and is trying to protect itself from pain before it arrives. But the heart was never meant to be a battlefield. It was meant to be a place of remembrance. Allah reminds us in the Quran that hearts find rest only in His remembrance, not in answers, not in certainty, not in control, but in remembering who holds all of it, even the things we cannot understand. The Prophet taught us that if we place our trust in Allah as we should, we would be provided for the way the birds are provided for. They leave their nests hungry and return full without knowing where their provision will come from, but fully trusting that it will. Overthinking begins when the heart forgets where to lean. You replay conversations. You relive moments that already passed. You imagine futures that may never happen. You ask yourself, what if, until your chest feels tight and your breath feels shallow. You lie awake at night, thinking about what you should have said, what you should have done, what you should have been. And slowly, without realizing it, you start carrying tomorrow's worries with today's strength. But Allah never asked you to carry tomorrow. He only asked you to trust Him today. Heartbreak hurts because love was real. Waiting hurts because hope is alive. Loneliness hurts because the soul was created for connection. Disappointment hurts because expectations once held light. Islam does not deny these feelings. It dignifies them. Even the prophets felt grief. Even the most beloved cried. Even the strongest hearts tremble. But faith transforms pain by giving it direction. Pain without faith turns inward and suffocates. Pain with faith rises upward and becomes dua. Overthinking tells you that you must solve everything now. Iman gently reminds you that Allah already has. Qadr is not meant to silence your feelings. It is meant to soften them. What was written for you will never miss you, and what was never written for you could not have stayed, no matter how tightly you held on. Sometimes the fastest way to stop overthinking is not to find answers, but to release the need for them, to whisper, "Oh Allah, I don't understand, but I trust you," to place the weight down, to let the heart breathe. Sabr is not standing still while life hurts. Sabr is trusting that Allah is working, even when you cannot see how. Tawakkul is not doing nothing. It is doing your best and then resting your heart in Allah's hands. Forgiveness is not forgetting the wound. It is choosing not to bleed every time you remember it. And healing is not becoming numb. Healing is becoming safe within yourself again, because you know Allah is near. So when your mind starts racing, return to something small and sacred. A quiet dhikr, a slow breath, a whispered dua. Remind your heart gently, I am not alone in this. The fastest way to stop overthinking is not to silence the mind, but to anchor the soul. Because when the soul remembers Allah, the mind learns to rest. Overthinking is not the enemy we often believe it to be. It is rarely born from weakness or lack of faith. More often, it rises from a heart that is trying to feel safe in a world that constantly shifts beneath its feet. When life feels uncertain, when outcomes feel fragile, the mind begins to work overtime, searching for control, reassurance, and predictability. It revisits moments, analyzes words, imagines futures, and prepares for pain that may never come. This is not because the heart is broken, but because it is deeply alive. At its core, overthinking is the heart's way of asking, am I protected? It is the soul trying to shield itself from disappointment, loss, or regret. When trust feels shaken, the mind steps in, believing that if it thinks hard enough, plans well enough, or worries deeply enough, it can prevent hurt. But the truth is, no amount of mental effort can replace the peace that comes from spiritual safety. The heart was never meant to find its refuge in analysis. It was meant to find it in Allah. When iman feels distant, the mind becomes loud. When reliance on Allah weakens, reliance on thoughts increases. The heart begins to cling to scenarios instead of surrendering to divine care. Yet Allah reminds us that true security does not come from knowing what will happen next, but from knowing who is in charge of what happens next. Overthinking is often a sign that the heart has forgotten where its true shelter lies. What the heart truly seeks is not answers, but assurance, not control, but care. When the heart reconnects to Allah, it slowly learns that safety was never in certainty, but in tawakkul. The mind quiets not when everything makes sense, but when the heart feels held, when the soul feels disconnected, the mind becomes a restless storm. Thoughts swirl endlessly, questions multiply, and worries echo louder than they should. Overthinking often begins not because life is complicated, but because the heart has lost its anchor. When the connection to Allah weakens, even the smallest uncertainty can feel overwhelming, and the mind starts to search for stability in places that cannot provide it. It becomes a constant loop of what ifs and why me, as if understanding every detail will bring relief. But the truth is, the mind can never carry the weight of the heart alone. The soul is not meant to wander without guidance, yet we live in a world that glorifies doing over being. We are taught to solve, fix, and predict, while the inner life quietly longs for presence, remembrance, and trust. When we forget the Creator, our hearts try to fill the emptiness with control, logic, and endless analysis. Every thought becomes louder, every fear sharper, until overthinking consumes energy meant for living, for praying, for simply breathing in the grace that surrounds us. The louder the mind, the quieter the soul has become. A heart connected to Allah, however, carries a different rhythm. It does not demand constant answers, nor does it panic over every possible outcome. It rests in the certainty that Allah sees, knows, and holds all matters. The mind may still think, but the heart is no longer enslaved by every thought. The soul remembers its origin, its purpose, and the one who governs all of creation. Overthinking diminishes when the heart is alive with connection, for the mind then learns to pause, to trust, and to recognize that not all answers are ours to hold, and not all outcomes are ours to direct. The stillness of the soul becomes the antidote to the noise of the mind. Faith does not promise a life free of pain, struggle, or disappointment. It does not erase the nights when your chest feels heavy, or the days when your heart aches with unanswered questions. But faith gives pain a place to rest, a space where it can exist without consuming the soul. When we are connected to Allah, sorrow is not a prison. It becomes a teacher, a companion that reminds us of our humanity and our need for divine mercy. The heart begins to understand that struggles are not meaningless even when their purpose is hidden, and that endurance itself carries its own reward. Pain can make us feel isolated, as if we are alone in carrying the weight of the world. Yet faith whispers gently that we are never alone, that every tear is seen, every sigh is heard, and every worry is known by the one who created us. Allah's presence does not always remove the hardship, but it transforms it from a burden into a path of spiritual intimacy. Each moment of difficulty becomes an opportunity to lean closer, to seek solace in remembrance, and to surrender in trust. When hearts face trials, the mind often races with endless questions. Why me? Why now? Why this pain? Overthinking attempts to answer what is beyond human comprehension. Faith, however, teaches that not all answers are meant for our immediate understanding. Sometimes the peace we seek does not come from solving the problem, but from surrendering to the one who already knows. In this surrender, the heart finds space to breathe. Trust replaces fear. Acceptance softens rigidity. The soul begins to heal not because the world has changed, but because the heart has returned to its true source. Faith transforms struggle into a quiet reminder of Allah's care, and pain into an invitation to draw nearer, to seek and to rest. Tawakkul is often misunderstood as passivity, as if placing trust in Allah means abandoning effort or retreating from responsibility. In truth, it is the most active form of faith, a surrender that moves hand in hand with action. It is doing what is within our power and leaving what is beyond it in the hands of the one who never errs, who never forgets, and whose wisdom surpasses all understanding. Tawakkul does not negate planning, preparation, or striving. Rather, it transforms the way we engage with life. We act fully, but without the burden of controlling outcomes that belong only to Allah. When the heart overthinks, it attempts to create safety through planning, imagining every possibility, and fearing every potential failure. Tawakkul teaches us that true safety is not in controlling every detail, but in knowing that Allah governs the unseen and the known alike. It is the comfort that even if the outcome is not what we envision, it is what was best for us. A blessing in ways our limited minds cannot always comprehend. The Prophet exemplified tawakkul through his life, showing that reliance on Allah is paired with courage, effort, and perseverance. He taught that while we strive for success, provision, and guidance, the ultimate results rest with Allah. Our role is to act sincerely, consistently, and with integrity, while allowing our hearts to rest in divine wisdom. Tawakkul becomes a balm for the overthinking mind. It quiets the endless questions of what if and what should I do, replacing them with a gentle surrender. I have done my part. Allah will handle the rest. The mind no longer carries the impossible weight of outcomes, and the heart is free to breathe, trust, and find peace. In practicing tawakkul, we learn that letting go of control is not weakness, but a profound act of faith. A surrender that uplifts the soul above the turbulence of doubt and fear. Allah's timing is perfect, even when our hearts feel weary and our patience runs thin. We measure life in hours, days, and years, yet He measures it in wisdom, mercy, and knowledge that we cannot fully grasp. The soul longs for immediacy, for answers, for relief, and in this longing, overthinking grows. We imagine that delays are failures, that unanswered prayers are signs of neglect, and that waiting is wasted time. But in reality, every pause carries meaning, every delay carries care, and every moment before fulfillment is part of a divine orchestration far beyond our understanding. The Prophet taught that what reaches us was never meant to miss us, and what misses us was never meant to reach us. This principle applies not only to material provision, but also to love, healing, guidance, and spiritual growth. Often we rush against divine timing, thinking we know better, trying to force solutions, replaying scenarios in our minds in a desperate attempt to predict what comes next. Yet the heart that surrenders to Allah's timing finds a stillness that no human effort can create. Overthinking arises when we forget that life unfolds according to a plan only Allah knows fully. We fear the unknown, but the unknown is not empty. It is filled with divine wisdom. We worry that waiting diminishes us, but patience cultivates strength, perspective, and resilience. Every moment spent in anticipation is a chance to grow closer to Allah, to refine our trust, and to release the illusion that we control outcomes. When the heart remembers that Allah's timing is flawless, the mind begins to slow. Anxiety loosens its grip. We start to see that waiting is not a punishment, but a form of mercy. Every delay is an opportunity to align our intentions, strengthen our faith, and practice surrender. The soul learns that fulfillment will arrive not according to our plans, but according to what is best, when it is best, and in a way that we are ready to receive. What burdens the heart is rarely the events themselves, but our attachment to outcomes. We cling to expectations, imagining that happiness, success, or peace depends entirely on a specific result. When things do not unfold as we hoped, the mind races, replaying scenarios, questioning choices, and searching desperately for control. Overthinking grows in this space of attachment where the heart forgets that life is not ours to command, but ours to navigate with trust. The weight is not in what happens, but in our insistence that life must bend to our desires. The Prophet reminded us that attachment to outcomes can blind us to blessings. He taught that what Allah gives is sufficient, what He withholds is protection, and what He delays is wisdom. When we accept this, the heart learns a subtle but profound freedom that our peace does not depend on the world's alignment with our plans. Even in disappointment, there is a space where gratitude and surrender coexist. Even when things feel unfair, there is a rhythm of divine wisdom that the mind cannot always trace. Our attachment grows because we forget the true source of security. We place our trust in circumstances, achievements, and human approval rather than in Allah, who is the provider, the sustainer, and the knower of all unseen matters. Overthinking attempts to bridge the gap between expectation and reality, but it cannot hold what is not meant to stay. The heart suffers because it seeks permanence in the impermanent and certainty in what is never fully ours. When we loosen this attachment, the weight begins to lift. The mind no longer frantically calculates every possibility, and the heart finds room to breathe. Peace comes not from controlling life, but from releasing the need to control outcomes. Trust replaces insistence. Surrender replaces struggle, and the soul, once heavy with worry, begins to float gently toward the serenity that only Allah can provide. Sabr is often misunderstood as passive endurance, as if patience simply means waiting quietly while life passes by. In reality, sabr is an active, conscious, and courageous stance of the heart. It is choosing to trust Allah in the midst of uncertainty, to remain steadfast when the mind urges escape, and to continue forward when every instinct tells you to give up. Patience is not a weakness, nor is it resignation. It is the soul's declaration that it believes in something greater than immediate relief, in a wisdom that surpasses human understanding. When overthinking takes hold, it feeds on impatience. The mind races with why now and why me. It measures time in human terms, unable to comprehend divine timing. The heart feels restless, as if waiting itself is a burr. And the soul struggles under the weight of imagined outcomes. Sabr, however, teaches the believer to shift perspective. It reminds the heart that trials are not meaningless, delays are not denials, and uncertainty is not abandonment. Every moment of patience is an act of worship, a surrender of the ego's demand for control, and a cultivation of trust that Allah is orchestrating what is best. The Prophet exemplified sabr in both joy and sorrow, showing that patience is not only for hardship, but also for restraint, for moderation, and for steady perseverance in faith. Overthinking often occurs when we attempt to rush life's lessons or force outcomes before their time. Sabr slows the mind, softens the heart, and allows divine wisdom to unfold naturally. When practiced sincerely, sabr becomes more than endurance, it becomes a refuge. The soul learns to rest even amidst uncertainty. The heart learns to breathe even in tension, and the mind begins to release its compulsive need to calculate and control. Patience transforms struggle into a quiet strength, worry into quiet trust, and waiting into a sacred space where the heart reconnects with Allah, discovering that in surrender there is both freedom and peace. Overthinking often grows when we forget who is truly in charge. The human mind, eager to protect and control, begins to take on responsibilities that were never meant for it. We try to plan every step, predict every outcome, and manage every possibility, believing that if we think hard enough, nothing will go wrong. Yet the truth is, life is in Allah's hands, and the more we attempt to control it, the heavier our hearts become. Overthinking is a sign that we have shifted our trust from the one who governs all affairs to the limited understanding of our own minds. When we forget that Allah is in control, fear and anxiety fill the spaces between thoughts. Every decision becomes a burden, every delay feels like failure, and every uncertainty turns into a mountain to climb. The mind, desperate to find security, loops endlessly over what ifs and how comes, trying to foresee every danger and preempt every disappointment. But no matter how tirelessly we calculate, the future remains with Allah, who knows what our hearts cannot see and who holds what we cannot reach. The Prophet taught that relying on Allah does not mean we abandon effort, but that our efforts are anchored in trust, not obsession. Overthinking diminishes when the heart remembers that ultimate authority belongs to Allah alone. The mind may still ponder, but the soul rests in assurance. The heaviness of imagined outcomes begins to lift, and the restless racing of thought slows. When we remind ourselves that Allah's wisdom surpasses human comprehension, that He is fully aware of every circumstance and every unseen matter, the compulsion to control diminishes. Trust replaces fear. Surrender replaces tension. And the heart learns that its true responsibility is not to manage life, but to remain connected, patient, and reliant on the one who manages all things perfectly. The weight of overthinking begins to fade as the heart returns to its rightful place of peace and reliance. Qadr, the divine decree, teaches us a form of peace that the mind alone cannot create. It is the understanding that everything in existence, every joy, every sorrow, every success, and every trial unfolds according to Allah's infinite wisdom. When overthinking takes hold, we resist what is, question what could have been, and fear what might come. We try to rewrite destiny with our thoughts, unaware that the soul's rest is found not in control, but in acceptance. Qadr reminds us that certainty does not lie in knowing the outcome, but in knowing the one who holds all outcomes. Human hearts often struggle with what they cannot see or predict. We replay mistakes, dwell on regrets, and anticipate dangers that may never arrive. Overthinking grows in the gap between desire and reality. Thank you between what we hope for and what life presents. Qadr gently shifts the heart's gaze from trying to master the world to trusting the master of the world. It does not ask us to be passive or indifferent. It asks us to anchor our hearts in the awareness that nothing escapes Allah's knowledge and nothing reaches us without His decree. The Prophet demonstrated this understanding through his life, facing challenges, losses, and delays with unwavering trust in Allah's plan. He showed that surrender to Qadr is not weakness, but the ultimate expression of faith, where patience and reliance replace fear and obsession. When we live with the consciousness of Qadr, the mind begins to soften its grip. The constant replaying of scenarios loses its power. The heart finds space to breathe, and the soul learns to rest in the certainty of divine wisdom. We come to understand that while we cannot predict every detail, we are never abandoned, and what is written for us will find its way, in its perfect time, in its perfect manner, and in the care of the one who never errs and never overlooks a single moment of our existence. Healing begins the moment the heart surrenders, when resistance gives way to acceptance and the soul stops fighting what is beyond its control. Overthinking thrives on struggle, on the desire to fix what cannot be fixed, to understand what cannot yet be understood, and to control what is not ours to hold. When we try to carry the weight of everything, past regrets, future fears, and present uncertainties, the mind becomes a storm and the heart a battlefield. True healing starts when we allow ourselves to release that burden into the hands of Allah, trusting that He knows what we cannot see and that His wisdom encompasses all that exists. The Prophet taught that seeking help through patience and prayer is a path to relief. Healing is not always about angering circumstances. Sometimes it is about transforming the way we relate to them. Overthinking attempts to rewrite reality with mental effort, but surrender allows reality to reshape the heart, softening it with the gentle touch of divine presence. When we let go of the illusion that we must have answers immediately, the soul begins to breathe again, and the mind finds quiet in the stillness of trust. Emotional healing is not linear, nor is it always visible. It often starts with small acts, a whispered dua, a moment of reflection, a conscious choice to let go of worry. These acts anchor the heart in divine care and remind the soul that it does not carry its burdens alone. Over time, surrender becomes a practice, a habit, and a refuge. The heart learns that it is safe even amidst uncertainty, that peace can exist alongside pain, and that healing does not require perfection, only trust, patience, and the willingness to place everything in the hands of the one who knows, loves, and sustains completely. In releasing resistance and embracing surrender, the soul discovers a profound freedom, a softening of the heart, and a quiet joy that overthinking could never produce. Forgiveness is a key that unlocks the chains that keep the heart trapped in pain. Overthinking often arises from wounds that linger, moments that replay endlessly, and words that echo long after they were spoken. The mind replays offenses, imagining scenarios where justice is served or reconciliation occurs, but the heart carries the weight far longer than the situation itself. Holding on to anger, resentment, or disappointment does not protect us. It prolongs suffering and fuels the endless loop of thoughts that prevent inner peace. True freedom comes when the heart chooses to forgive, not for the sake of the one who hurt us, but for its own release. The Prophet emphasized the beauty of forgiveness, showing that it is an act of strength, patience, and closeness to Allah. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting or excusing harm, nor does it require reopening doors that must remain closed. It is a deliberate decision to stop bleeding every time the memory surfaces, to no longer allow the past to dictate the present. By forgiving, the heart stops feeding the mind's obsession with what could have been and begins to breathe again. Overthinking often magnifies the wrongs done to us, twisting them into endless scenarios of regret, anger, or self-blame. Forgiveness interrupts this cycle. It teaches the soul that the power to find peace lies within, not in changing others or rewriting events. When we forgive, the weight of resentment lifts, and the heart learns that its safety does not depend on retribution, but on surrendering pain to Allah and choosing mercy over bitterness. In practicing forgiveness, the heart becomes lighter, and the mind slows its restless loops. Emotional wounds begin to soften, and overthinking loses its grip. The soul discovers that letting go is not weakness, but a courageous act of faith, an acknowledgement that true peace arises not from controlling others, but from releasing the burden of holding on to what was never meant to define us. Loneliness can feel like an endless echo, a heavy silence that surrounds the heart and amplifies every fear and doubt. Overthinking often thrives in this quiet as the mind searches for connection, reassurance, and meaning in spaces where it feels absent. We imagine scenarios, replay conversations, and create outcomes that may never exist, trying to fill the void with thought alone. Yet the deepest remedy for loneliness is not in mental effort or human approval, it is in remembering Allah's constant presence. The soul was created for connection, and the heart was made to recognize its creator. When we earn inward to that relationship, the emptiness begins to soften, and the restless mind finds stillness. The Quran reminds us that Allah is closer to us than our jugular vein, that He hears every whisper of the heart and sees every tear. This awareness transforms loneliness from a burden into a space of intimacy. The heart learns that it is never truly alone, that even in moments of isolation, divine companionship surrounds it. Overthinking diminishes when the soul rests in the certainty of this presence, when the heart no longer searches for validation from what is temporary and finds comfort in what is eternal. The Prophet exemplified this intimacy with Allah, teaching that sincere remembrance, prayer, and reliance transforms solitude into sacred communion. When the mind races with imagined fears or unmet expectations, a whispered dhikr, a gentle dua, or quiet reflection can anchor the heart and remind it of its true companion. Over time, loneliness becomes less about absence and more about awareness, less about what is missing and more about what is always near. The heart begins to breathe more freely, the mind slows its relentless chatter, and the soul discovers that true connection is not built on the fleeting presence of others, but on the enduring nearness of Allah, who never leaves, never turns away, and whose love surpasses all human understanding. Stillness is a quiet revolution of the heart, a gentle pause in the midst of life's constant noise. Overthinking thrives when the mind is always in motion, when every moment is filled with planning, analyzing, or worrying about what has passed or what is yet to come. The heart becomes a prisoner of thought, and the soul aches for relief. True stillness is not merely the absence of activity. It is the presence of awareness, a conscious turning inward toward Allah. In this stillness, the mind slows, the chest softens, and the heart remembers its source. The Quran reminds us that hearts find rest in the remembrance of Allah. Stillness is the vessel for this remembrance, a space where the soul can exhale and surrender what it cannot hold. When the mind is quiet, the heart can hear the whispers of guidance, the nudges of wisdom, and the soft reassurance that Allah is near. Overthinking diminishes not by forcing the mind to stop, but by allowing the heart to anchor in what is eternal rather than what is temporary. The Prophet modeled moments of stillness through reflection, prayer, and quiet contemplation. These moments were not signs of inactivity, but of profound connection and intentional presence. They remind us that stillness is a practice, a discipline, and a form of worship. Each pause, each conscious breath, each whispered dua becomes a step toward inner calm and clarity. Stillness allows the heart to realign with what truly matters, offering space to release fears, regrets, and endless what-ifs. It is in these pauses that overthinking loses its power and the soul begins to rest. Through stillness, the heart remembers that life does not need to be controlled and peace does not require perfection. The mind gradually learns to trust, the chest softens, and the soul discovers that true serenity is not found in constant doing, but in conscious, intentional being, anchored in the nearness of Allah. The fastest way to peace is to return the heart to Allah again and again in moments of doubt, fear, and restlessness. Overthinking grows when the heart drifts, when trust falters, and when the soul forgets its true source of refuge. We search for answers, reassurance, and control in the world around us, in people, plans, or circumstances, yet none of these can truly anchor the heart. Only Allah, who sees all, knows all, and holds all, can provide the deep, enduring calm that the mind longs for, but cannot manufacture on its own. Returning to Allah is not a single act, but a continual practice. It is in the whispered dhikr when the chest feels tight, the quiet dua when the night feels heavy, the surrender in prayer when the mind spins with endless what-ifs. Each return is a small reclamation of the heart, a gentle reminder that security, provision, and guidance rest in the hands of the one who never errs. Over time, these moments of returning become a rhythm, a sacred habit that softens the restless mind and lifts the weight from the chest. The Prophet showed us the power of consistent turning to Allah, teaching that closeness is cultivated not through perfection, but through sincerity, persistence, and remembrance. Even when life overwhelms, even when the heart feels scattered, each conscious return restores balance, grounding the soul in certainty, trust, and peace. When the heart repeatedly chooses Allah, overthinking begins to fade. The mind learns that it does not need to solve everything. The chest learns that it can release its burdens. And the soul learns that fulfillment, guidance, and healing are already in the care of the one who knows best. The heart becomes lighter, the thoughts quieter, and the spirit steadier. In every return, the soul discovers the simplest, fastest, and most profound path to stillness, placing itself fully, gently, and unwaveringly in Allah's hands, again and again, without hesitation, without doubt, and without reservation.